unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live, Boxing Ego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live.
Wow. Shakur Stevenson does it again. It appears he is hating on Gervonta Davis because Tank seems to be able to get the fights that Shakur Stevenson truly wants. And I'm going to fully break that down in this video. In a brand new interview with Fight Hype, Shakur Stevenson spoke on the thoughts of a potential fight with Lomachenko and fellow southpaw, face of boxing, Gervonta Davis. He says, and I quote, honestly, I don't respect it just because of the fact that these dudes been at the same weight class for so long. And now that I'm kind of on the horizon of like getting the Lomachenko fight, now everybody wants to talk about Tank versus Loma when we could have been talking about this early on in my pro career when these two guys was, you know, Loma was in his prime and Tank was about to reach that peak. But I feel like now it's like Lomachenko is basically on the way out, like one or two more fights left in his career, probably. And I think that I feel as though they're talking and taking this fight now because the time is now. But if we're talking about like how the fight will play out, I still think like with Lomachenko's skills and stuff, it will still be a good fight. I don't think that Lomachenko is a pushover, even though he is older. With the experience, he got the knowledge. I think that it could be a tremendous fight. All it's gonna boil down to is can Lomachenko have punch resistance to what Tank is throwing. Now, as I'm reading, in case that sounded a bit choppy, that's because the transcript is verbatim. So all the and uhs, that's literally what Shakur Stevenson said. So the quote is verbatim. You know, that had the fillers have not been removed. So that's why it sounded like that as I was reading. The moment you've been waiting for, the ego thoughts. This doesn't look good for Shakur Stevenson. First, Tank Davis, his last fight, because we'll start there because that's a fight that's actually been completed. When the fight was announced that Gervonta Davis was going to fight Frank Martin, you had Shakur Stevenson pretty much hating on that fight, saying stuff to the effect of Frank's not elite. You know, Shakur went on to say other things like Frank's not elite. Who is he beat? He hasn't beaten anybody. And for someone with Shakur's resume, that's very striking that he's talking about the next man's resume. Because Michelle Rivera, especially when we're talking about lightweight, is better than anyone that he beat convincingly. You know, you could say Edwin De Los Santos, but that wasn't really a great performance. So all in all, Shakur started hating on Tank fighting against Frank Martin, saying Frank wasn't elite and Frank's not ready for this and he's not that good of a fighter. But when ESPN was reporting that Shakur Stevenson was finna fight Frank Martin, he was all for it and said, oh, I'm gonna show you and this, that, and he was excited for it. Now, same thing with Vasyl Lomachenko. In the same way that he downplayed Tank's fight when he got Frank Martin, saying Frank wasn't elite, he hadn't beat anyone. What has he done? Nobody was checking for Frank Martin until his name got mentioned with me, which is not true because I've been checking for Frank Martin well before the fight was announced. Like the Michelle Rivera fight was before the rumor that Shakur was going to fight Frank Martin. So people have been watching Frank Martin on PBC when he was fighting Romero Dunno and, you know, Jackson Marinez and stuff like that. So I don't know where Shakur gets off believing that Frank Martin wasn't a thing until his name got linked with him. But now he's doing the same thing in this brand new interview, recent interview. He's talking about a Lomachenko and Tank fight, and he's pretty much hating. He's saying that, oh, Lomachenko, why are they talking about it now? Loma's not in his prime. But you're still like, and the funny thing is, this new generation of fighters, they need PR people bad. Social media is ripping them to shreds. I tell you guys all the time, the most dangerous thing is a camera and a microphone and the internet, social media. You got people who are freely doing these interviews, and I don't know how much they're considering what is being said and what they are saying, but it comes off as very contradictory. He's saying that Lomachenko's not in his prime, but he's also mad that the Tank and Loma conversations are being had right now. And he's like, why didn't they have this conversation of fighting each other a long time ago? It's really like pure delusion. He says, now that I'm on the kind of horizon of like getting the Lomachenko fight, now everybody wants to talk about Tank and Loma. I don't know what perspective some of these guys are coming from with some of the statements like this, but what are you talking about? The reality is this, and it shows you the level of like ego and pride, no pun intended, to some of these young fighters. They're acting like they're bona fide Floyd, Money Mayweather, or Gervonta Davis level stars and saying like, I'm the A side. Nobody knew about Frank Martin, Shakur says. He's also saying stuff like, now that I'm on the cusp or the horizon of getting a Lomachenko fight. What are you talking about? How are you on the cusp of getting a Lomachenko fight when Bob Arum is literally currently doing interviews saying, why would Lomachenko fight Shakur Stevenson? Gervonta Davis is a much bigger fight. So what is Shakur even talking about there, saying he's on the horizon of getting a Lomachenko fight? And it looks bad because the world knows that Shakur Stevenson, he's definitely called for the Lomachenko fight and called for some of the big fights. But through his promoter, Top Rank, his current promoter, which he has one more final fight with, and then we'll see what he decides to do, he hasn't gotten any of these big name fights that would push him over to maybe like a superstar status. Plus, we don't know if he can be pushed over the ledge with his style, you know, and his charisma and, you know, his brand, because he's kind of behind. I even seen Shakur Stevenson was pretty much blaming Top Rank and saying that they stifled his career. So what are you talking about? You're on the horizon of getting a Lomachenko fight. And literally probably a month ago or so, Shakur went on this Twitter rant and he was like, I'm being blackballed and they're trying to blackball me and keep me away from top fighters. And he was talking about Top Rank doesn't want to give him opportunities. And don't let them fool you. In the words of Bob Marley, don't let them fool you. Boxing ego is elite. I'm on top of my job, please believe it, so I still have the tweets. He says, why aren't they talking about Lomachenko versus Shakur Stevenson? Shakur Stevenson says, because they trying to freeze me out. Uck all them. Floyd been told me about these ninjas. Floyd told me years ago about Top Rank, don't uck with black fighters. They just use you until they can't use you no more. Tonight was them trying to make a statement to me. Bob don't got no say no more. They just letting him believe he run it, but they taking over his company behind the scenes. Bunch of sharks who don't really F with Bob Arum like that. And he was saying he's been blackballed. This is the night that Lomachenko beat Kambosos. So this, you guys, if you want the specific date, then you can also look to that particular fight. Actually, I can look on the tweet, most likely. It was May 11th, 2024. So the day Lomachenko fought Kambosos and stopped him, something Devin Haney didn't do in 24 rounds. That's when Shakur was watching the telecast. They weren't mentioning his name for Lomachenko. So what is he talking about in this new interview, saying these guys have been at the same weight class for so long, and now that I'm kind of on the horizon of like getting the Lomachenko fight, now everybody wants to talk about Tank and Loma. You just complained May 11th, as I just showed you, that you've been blackballed because you're a black fighter with Top Rank, and they don't want to match you with Top Rank. So it sounds very bizarre what Shakur is saying. Furthermore, the level of entitlement is insane. He's basically saying, these guys have been at the division longer than me. How come they didn't get their fight out of the way? Why are they talking about it now that I'm a lightweight? As if the whole world of boxing and the business of boxing revolves around Shakur Stevenson. Like, as if they conspired and waited till Shakur got to the division and decided, hey, this makes sense. There's a lot more parameters. Like, for example, Tank was young in his career. They were building him through PBC fights, marketing him in different markets. And Lomachenko has been with Top Rank. He was doing his own thing, fighting Teofimo and whoever else he was fighting, Linares and whoever else, right? And Tank was with Mayweather Promotions. He had different handlers. Now Tank signed a new deal. He's not with Mayweather Promotions anymore. According to Floyd Mayweather, Leonard Ellerbe is not with Mayweather Promotions anymore. So we're in a whole different era. And now it looks like the time is now. Bob Arum in the past said he didn't really want to work with PBC, but based on the current climate of making fights, maybe he's now forced to potentially consider making fights with Al Heyman based on where his company's at and where the game's at, right? So things change over time. Shakur's sitting around acting entitled as if, why are they talking about it now? They should have already fought. But the business might not have made sense for them to fight 5 years ago when Shakur Stevenson was probably a featherweight or whatnot. So I think that's a miscalculation by Shakur as well, to make it sound as if the game revolves around him and now they want to talk about Tank and Loma. They want to talk about Tank versus Loma because Tank's running out of people to fight. He's looking for big marquee fights and he's running out of names. He just decimated Frank Martin. He already beat Rolly, already beat Pitbull Cruz, already beat Ryan Garcia in a massive fight. So they're trying to keep the train rolling with big fights, and now everything aligns. We might get Lomachenko versus Tank Davis. It has literally nothing to do with Shakur at all. It's just boxing is a business, and that's when fights happen. Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis. People wanted to see that fight well before it actually happened, but differences, different HBOs and Showtimes, and same thing with Mayweather Pacquiao. There's all these things that potentially get in the way. Maybe the companies want to move a fighter a certain way. There's other fights they have to get out, you know, whatever the case is. Maybe they're in different divisions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how boxing happens. The fights happen when it makes sense for everybody involved, not just when it makes sense for one person. You know, when the money in the pot is what it's supposed to be, the brands are where they need to be, and various variables, that's when typically you get the fight. Literally has nothing to do with Shakur getting the lightweight, and now he's making it like he was gonna get the Lomachenko fight, but a month ago he was just talking about how he's being blackballed. So I literally don't understand it. Bob Arum's doing interviews and he told Shakur Stevenson to consider free agency and see what's out there. So it doesn't look like Shakur Stevenson is a very high priority with Top Rank based on maybe his style, his brand, or whatever reason, you know. Salary cap. Doesn't sound like Bob Arum is too shaken up if Shakur stays or leaves. If he does decide to stay with Top Rank, the name that Bob Arum mentioned in recent interviews was Dennis Berinchenko, the one that just beat Navarrete. He didn't say nothing about making Shakur versus Lomachenko. So yet again, what is Shakur even talking about? He's on the horizon of getting a Lomachenko fight. Doesn't sound like it, buddy. Doesn't sound like you were ever in the mix to get a Lomachenko fight, which is why you complained about it. So now that Tank is about to get it, it clearly shows that you hating, because Tank yet again keeps getting the fights and the names, and his profile keeps growing while you're complaining, stranded on Top Rank, complaining about not getting the fights that'll make you into a star. And then when you had an opportunity with the PBC fighter to fight someone on paper that was better than any of the guys, especially at lightweight, that you really had been fighting. You fought one like lower tiered PBC fighter, and it was literally one of the worst fights that people have watched in the last couple of years. It was slow pace. They both combined for like a career low amount of punches thrown and landed for lightweights. And Tank, meanwhile, he's knocking people out, exciting fights, big live gates, pay-per-view numbers, hitting backflips, getting knockouts, going viral, saying the cool stuff, got the Hearts of Chrome, bag and trunks and stuff like that. And Shakur, he just seems kind of jealous and envious of that. I'm not saying necessarily Tank as a person, but the motion that Tank is getting. And I hope Tank gets the Lomachenko fight because I would pay for it. I want to see it. It has nothing to do with Shakur Stevenson. It's a good fight. And the funny thing is, when you have green in your eyes, when you're green with envy, people end up telling on themselves. Shakur, when he finally started speaking in the part of the interview about the actual fight, he's basically telling you Lomachenko is a capable body. It just depends on if he could take Tank shots. But he's veteran, he has a lot of skills and stuff like that. So what's this Lomachenko's out of prime and all that type of stuff, and he's older and he has 1 or 2 fights left? Why are you saying that, but you want to fight the man? Why are you saying that, but you're basically in the same interview contradicting yourself, saying that Lomachenko is potentially capable of handling his own? And everybody, it's not just Shakur, but everybody who's hating on Tank, possibly, it's not even a done deal to our knowledge, but just the fact that Tank could possibly get a Lomachenko fight has triggered a lot of people, especially the Tank haters, right? And the funny thing is this, they're making it sound like Lomachenko is so old, like he's a mummy. Lomachenko is like 36 years old, and Shakur Stevenson's big bro, Terrence Crawford, is about the same age, 36, 37, and he's moving up in weight class. And then I guarantee you, if you ask Shakur Stevenson about Terrence Crawford Madrimov, he's probably gonna say, I'm not picking no one to beat Bud. And he's saying stuff like Bud can beat Canelo. So how come Bud can move up 2-3 weight classes and beat Canelo at age 36, 37, but then you're trying to make Lomachenko sound like he's old as dust and not capable, when his last performance, he stopped a guy who's never been stopped, just like Tank Davis did. Tank stopped Frank Martin, who had never been stopped. Lomachenko stopped George Kambosos, who had never been stopped. Keep in mind, Kambosos fought Teofimo, a young, strong, athletic fighter who was undefeated and had just beaten Lomachenko. Teofimo couldn't stop Kambosos. In fact, he got dropped by Kambosos. He did hurt him, but he couldn't stop Kambosos. Lomachenko stopped Kambosos. Devin Haney, another young, much bigger guy than Kambosos, had 24 rounds with George Kambosos, and he couldn't stop Kambosos. Lomachenko, at this current age, just in May, the beginning of May, went over to Australia, won every round, and stopped Kambosos. So you got to give Lomachenko his props. And before that was the Devin Haney fight. And you ask anybody around, people say it was either close or people say Lomachenko, a lot of people think Lomachenko won that fight. So people are clearly hating that Gervonta Davis is his time and he could get the Lomachenko fight, because they're making it sound like Loma's washed up and been putting up bad performances. But his last 2 performances are arguably beating Devin Haney, where everybody was screaming robbery, and knocking out George Kambosos. So why are we putting he's not in prime and he's past his prime, this is not his weight class and stuff? But people just last year were screaming that he was robbed versus Devin Haney, and then he came back, got a belt, so he's a champion, and he stopped the guy that Devin Haney couldn't stop, nor the younger Teofimo. And Teofimo definitely has power. So from me, I think a lot of people are hating on Gervonta Davis because he got that motion.